the last time? It was in the year 2019.
Back in the day.
Back in the day, yeah.
2020, early 2020.
No, for me,
We're live, I think, Oscar.
yeah, we are live. Just give me 1 second here. Just trying to get things out.
Remember the topic?
Oh, I think we're going to talk about, I think it's about, is it? Yeah, I'm already there. Don't worry. You think you got me or something? Not going to happen.
It's an always.
This is a quantum overdrive teragigabyte storage device. It's all there. Don't worry. All of it.
What's the
Word
hash
by
rate?
word.
What's your hash rate trading at right now?
Yeah. And you can't hack it. You can't. All right. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to, once again, the KoreSummit webinar series 2021. My name is Oscar Joffrey, and once again, we're delighted to have you this afternoon. We're going to have another great discussion. I hope you got the one in the morning today. That was a doozy. I enjoyed that one very much, and this one is going to be another good one. I brought two different opposite sides to a great discussion today. You know the drill. It's very simple. We have no PowerPoint presentations. We just a nice cup of coffee, juice, or water, and enjoying the conversation as we have a dialogue regarding this incredible topic that I think needs a lot of attention. So before we get started, I want to give our panelists, maybe some of you have already met them, but maybe you haven't. Gentlemen, please, let's start with Los Angeles.
I am in LA today. Elliot Chun here, all the way out from sunny California. Great to be here, Oscar. Thanks for doing these important educational sessions. My name is Elliot Chun. I am co-founder and CEO of Emergence at Wield & Co. We work with early stage companies that are on their journey through private capital markets and help where we can. And we'll talk about one of those important functions today. Andy, to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Korn. I am the CEO of E5A, our official name E5A Integrated Marketing, if you're looking for the website. And we are a systematic data-driven investor acquisition firm. So we perform many of the same functions of a marketing or advertising agency, but our sole focus is on acquiring investors. We work marketing a lot of investment and financial products, and a couple of years ago started doing Reg D into Reg A+, and now Reg CF, being that it will be at 5 million starting on March 15th.
Wow, thank you. You let it in good. So you know what? You did that before. You go, Oscar, before we get started, let's remind everybody, we're like 2 weeks away, everyone, 2 weeks away from a great launch of the amendments to the Jobs Act, which, you know, to you, Elliot, you're involved with the father of the Jobs Act. So great day. It's going to start off great. We'll talk a little bit about that afterwards, but great reminder, $5 million on Reg CF, 75 million on Reg A. And I think it's pretty interesting, this topic, how that will play out, how important investor acquisition, the impact it will have. And the fact that two of you are coming from different sides, you know, Elliot coming from the broker-dealer side, and then yourself, Andrew, from the, marketing. You've been in both, but it's in one advantage. It'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on it. So let's start with you first a little bit, Elliot. I mean, as broker-dealers, a lot of them aren't familiar with the term investor acquisition other than hunting for investors, but this is very different what we're talking about here. So if you could just give us an overview from a broker-dealer, and I'll come back to you, Andrew, as well. Because interesting enough, I get asked this a lot. What is investor acquisition versus a broker-dealer hunting for?
Yeah, I mean, I actually would like to give recognition to the term investor acquisition. I think it is probably the best description that we've had in a while, because previously this function has been described by many different terms, right? Marketing, investor relations, selling. There's a lot of terms that have been coined to describe this process. And I actually think the term investor acquisition does it the best in two words, right? So what are those words? Investor on one side, that is the who. Who is the person that will be financially investing into what you are raising capital for, right? And that profile of the who, we'll go through that, is very important. But when you think about how you interact, engage, and bring that investor along through your journey and through your investing process is a vital thing to think about in the broader capital raise environment. So the investor part, key. Second part, acquisition. And note that it's not marketing, even though marketing is a component of it. And it's not relations because they're not a part of your journey yet. This investor acquisition process is, how do you convince somebody that your company / idea / journey is something that they want to be on? And the whole process of showing that you have access to invest, you are an accountable team that and is doing it with all the right regulations and compliance. And then finally, that you are the team to execute that vision. It's very much a storytelling journey that is required to get an investor through that acquisition process. So I love the terminology and I love the term because I believe it adequately and sufficiently describes that it's not just a transaction that is trying to happen here. You're actually trying to acquire somebody to have them a part of your journey, which doesn't start and end with wiring of money.
Very interesting. Look at that. Can you add to that, Andrew?
Well, I wonder who coined the phrase investor acquisition. Let me think.
Hold on. I have notes on that. I do. I even have the email, but that's okay. It's kudos, man. Okay,
Thank you. So yeah, we've been using that term for about 6 years, and we've done a lot of work institutionally and then also through the financial advisor channel, and never really called it investor acquisition, because what would happen is, especially in the institutional side, there's a lot of personal involvement. And what firms like mine do is really look for intent when it's on the institutional side, or intent and real interest with the advisors. Once things move to retail, whether we're marketing or trying to acquire investors for an investment product or a Reg A plus or a Reg CF, it's at scale and it's a little less personalized because you're not necessarily on the phone with them. Most of it happens in a highly automated fashion. So the same way people use the term customer acquisition, if you're selling bubblegum or if you're McDonald's, it is not done through a relationship. The relationship is built through the way they go through their journey of never having heard of you to having heard of you, all the way through, gee, I'm going to try this, or in the case of a CF or an A plus, I'm going to allocate money. And actually, there's 2 more steps after them even allocating. One is them telling a friend and sharing that information. And then the second is continuing them on the journey. And Oscar can speak to this, especially in the perk she sits as in the transfer agent role, of seeing people come back and investing a second time and a third time. And that is part of it. So that's part of the ongoing communications that happens between an issuer or a company and once they've acquired that investor. So it doesn't really stop once they originally place money into the company. I invested in the CF this morning. Thank you very much. I put $300 into a startup that I believe in quite a bit and happens to be a client. I don't usually go in and run through the process like that, but having edited a lot of the materials, what really got me was their, and we talked about this yesterday a little bit, was their video of case histories. And in this case, they're patients who have been essentially cured by a medical device. So, I found it really compelling enough to actually invest myself. So there you go.
Oh, so you went through the journey yourself, you experienced it, you clicked the button, you went through it all, you go, so that's what it's like, right?
Yeah, I wanted to see every inch of it as well, because our official media launch is Friday morning. So I wanted to make sure, everything, every piston is firing properly and in sync. So
perfect.
But that brings up probably one of the more underemphasized components of the investor acquisition process, which, Andrew, you just highlighted, the emotional connection, right? You saw something in the videos that struck something within you that, and you're a little bit different, but that incited you to take an action to say, I want to be a part of this journey. And I think that is so key in the investor acquisition process today, which is, how do you emotionally connect? Because investing is an emotional thing, particularly within the more retail space. And so how can you build that emotional connection so that when people are evaluating whether or not it's a right fit for them, that they're not just getting the financial alignment to the investment, that there is something else that connects that person to the investment. And when you can properly either tell that story or build that connection, it makes the investor acquisition process a little easier. Not a lot easier, but it makes it easier.
Yeah, nothing makes it easy, for sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
But yes, I mean, you can look at, is the product viable? Yes. How big is the market size? Okay, it's there and it's definitely worth it. This is not going to be a lifestyle business. It's going to be a real growth business. Do they have a minimally viable product? In this case, they have a completely viable product and over 2,000 treatments have been done. So I might as well reveal it's invest in Sola, SOLA therapy.com. And the official launch is Friday, but the page is up now. And, with over 2,000 treatments done, you've got a video, and it's a crappy video because these are live testimonials of women whose lives have been changed. Basically, they have a therapy for chronic pelvic pain. And I can run through all here's what the device does, here's how big the market is, all the quantitative stuff and all the selling points. But what really got me was they have a chief science officer, and any company that's got someone with the same title as Spock from Star Trek, gotta love that. And then when I saw these women who have basically been cured, I was like, I'd be crazy not to not just help them in their journey of acquiring investors, but also putting money in myself and putting my money where my mouth is. So, a lot of what goes in that, we've got data, we've got nearly 1 million accredited investors who we use with CF and Reg A. But in this case, and I've given a little bit about the company, how many OBGYN practices are there? How many people work within them? What level would they be interested in investing in a device on a personal level? What other healthcare people? Whose lives are being affected and how? how do we locate and acquire data on them? So that essentially is three groups. We have people who just invest in private deals. We have the professionals in and around the industry who may be interested in investing. And then we have the people who it's helping. So essentially the customers. So if I were to switch that, let's say, to bubblegum, it would be who, general investors who makes bubblegum and understands the process, and everyone along the value chain, what ingredients go in, and then who choose bubblegum. So we're constantly looking for data on these different audiences so that we can start off with that and have again, increase our probability of success as we are trying to acquire investors.
Okay, so the two of you, thank you for the investment journey. That was a nice little plug you put in there, but that was good. That was a good example of
it was in context, or I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, of course. Don't worry. Who am I to go and give you a quick slap? Who am I? I'm nobody. No, but all fairness aside, so
my ears.
The key element that here, obviously, let's put it back to where we were. Why it's so important. We started with what we were talking about was the messaging and how the messaging could drive a person to it. So we really haven't gone into in a little bit more detail all the elements we got. Elliot provided his perspective from a broker dealer, what he thought. I didn't hear from you, Andrew, or maybe I misunderstood. Did you? If from your view, you provided an example.
Nothing happens unless you acquire investors. You can build the best product. You can have the best ideas. You can have the best team. But if you're out raising money and no one is there to put money in, and you don't acquire investors, you're not going to get very far. So, you can, it's interesting because you can have great attorneys and they'll do the best paperwork. You can hire the best broker dealer and they can set everything up and it's all legal compliant and make it near frictionless for people to invest. But unless investors are brought to that story, you don't really have anything. I think it's McKinsey who said nothing happens until something's sold. And there's a correlation where nothing happens until there's an investor in this case.
Okay, fair enough. So, but we know they sit over here and they sit over here in an array of buckets, right? We see them in one bucket where we use social media to get access to them. That's one. There's another bucket where the registered investment advisors, which we're now starting to have a really good conversation around that. And so, because when I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I hear often, by investors. I don't know about you guys, but every other day I get an email. You can buy investors for 10,000. You can have an entire list. That's not what you're saying here. I just don't, because when you said acquire, I hear the word acquire, I don't want the audience to think, I just got to go out and buy it. What you're really saying is, I hope I interpret it, is that you acquire investors from the sense that your opportunity itself and then how it's then deployed through these different channels to attract them to come to your site. Did I get that correctly for me?
Sure. Elliot, do you want to?
I do want to echo what you said, Andrew, which this is the most vital part of the process. This is not just for someone that's going through Reg A. This is for, generally speaking, any private company. The investor acquisition process is it. If you don't do that successfully, and many groups have not, you've likely incurred some significant out-of-pocket expenses and not going anywhere else with it. So this phase is vital. It's essential, and every successful company has, generally speaking, done this process well. They've succeeded in some way, shape, or form. And with the tools that are now available to us in 2021, We feel more and more people out there, people that are listening now that have a passion project, have something that they have a strong feeling and sense for solving in the world. You're going to have an ability to take a shot at building it. And at some point in time, you're going to have come to the question or to the decision of, how do I go about my investor acquisition process? And it is tough. It is not easy, right? But there are ways to make it easier, and there are ways to be able to help facilitate longer term success with good investors. And that's a big focus here of this discussion. There's, as Oscar had mentioned, there's shortcut ways where you can buy investor lists and just basically spam that list and hope that you get some responses back. Or there's that's one spectrum, or there's the other spectrum where you take the time up front to properly identify the profile of who you want as an investor into your company and facilitate a organized process in terms of going out and building those relationships. So I think that's important to note here.
Yeah, and a lot of those relationships are built digitally. One of the things that I ask issuers, or I'll ask an entrepreneur, I'm like, why do you want to do a $5 million CF? Why do you want to raise your $20 million through Reg A Plus? Because the first answer should be is, I want a boatload of investors. If you want a really clean cap table with 5 people on it, crowdfunding is not the route for you. So if you essentially want to build a big tent or a big boat and have a lot of people go on this journey with you, then crowdfunding is a really great way to go. And, one of the other things we do, and, I say we're a systematic data-driven investor acquisition firm. Sometimes I'll say we're a systematic data-driven investor acquisition at scale firm, because it is all about, you're not going to have 500 investors. If you're raising $20 million, you're going to have thousands of investors. If you're going to come up with a $5,000 minimum or a $10,000 minimum, that's not going to work in this industry. So there are certain circumstances where it might, and of course we can, through data, solicit only people who are accredited, even though they don't need to be for Reg A Plus or CF. It's possible to do that. And there's certain times that's a good workaround, but most of the time it's because you want thousands of investors and you want thousands of people to say, yes, I believe in what you're doing so much so I'm willing to place money in it. And
it's not even just investors at that point. You're, and this is a point where I think we get hung up on terms. You haven't just taken, you're not just taking an investor's money. The success that we're seeing is not just taking an investor money and saying, oh, great, thanks, you're on the journey. It is further embedding them into your process and having them become company evangelists for your mission and what your vision is, and to help you succeed in that vision. The power in using crowdfunding and Reg A Plus is taking those thousands of people and each of them telling 1 or 2 or 10 people about your product, your service, or whatever you're delivering to the market, and allowing, enabling, and embracing what the network effects can be when you financially align the masses to the success of your company. That's the brilliance of this whole thing. And that's the whole reason why today you are seeing so much of publicly traded equities trade on market sentiment. It's not based upon numbers as it once was before. It's based on, I use this product every day. So if I'm using it every day, why wouldn't I want to be an investor into that company and therefore share in the financial success of the products that I love to use every day? We're just talking about doing this at a much, much, much earlier stage. And that is also why it is so critically important to consider a Reg CF, Reg A plus raise for early stage companies that are consumer focused or that are looking to engage with broad amount of customers in order to facilitate success. Because this is a genius way to be able to engage that audience and be able to leverage what you are building for not just investors, but also converting them to consumers or customers or clients of your product.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are B2B situations where there is ginormous interest in retail as well. We have a new client onboarding, and I won't mention names, but essentially they make very low emission jet fuel from either the waste that comes out of a dairy farm, also known as cow manure. They capture the methane, turn it into really low emission jet fuel. They also can cap all those oil wells that are just sitting there with methane pouring out of them and turn that also into fuel. They've got a bunch of cases like this. So it's a pure B2B sale, but who doesn't want to have that happen? And,
well, look, you're aligning to where a lot of the themes that we're going to be seeing successful in investor acquisition, back to the emotional side, the emotional connection. These themes in climate technology, in mobility, in energy and waste innovation, as Andrew just mentions, in food and agriculture and land use, things that are improving the built environment, lowering greenhouse gases. All of these environmental and socially impact-oriented themes are ways to be able to align to the messaging that we're hearing in the markets today, which is investors not only want to take financial action, but they want their financial actions to have a very specific outcome, which is to, generally speaking, improve the environment, improve climate change, improve health, address issues that are top of mind. It was very, very, very difficult to do that 10 years ago. People were like, oh, I'm investing in GE because they have an energy efficiency side. All right, well, GE does a ton of different stuff. With the accessibility of crowdfunding and Reg A plus and even private investing, you now have an access to invest into very specific initiatives that can meet an investor's, generally speaking, their investing preferences. And that's something that's very powerful. That's something that didn't exist 5-10 years ago, not to the level, even 3 years ago, it didn't exist to the level that exists now. And that's part of the reason why we're so excited about the future of both of these regulations and the ability to engage investors going forward. Because now you're able to present things that fit into their beliefs and their themes. And these are methods that Reg A plus and Reg CF are ways that certainly allow for that.
Yeah, so we have some buckets that we look at when it comes to these types of firms, the issuers who we believe are going to be successful. So ESG, the environmental, social, and governance, the things that the UN sustainability is looking at, things like what we just talked about, turning waste into fuel. So that's one bucket, is the ESG. Another is innovation, things that are just going to shake things up, companies that will make a seismic impact on industries. And then the third bucket, believe it or not, is just simple yield. How can I get income? Because we have bond yields at near zero. They're not going up anytime soon. We heard Powell speak yesterday afternoon, calmed the markets down on inflation and interest rates. So, you've got an aging society, not just in the US, but around the globe. How are we going to switch from growth to income for the retiring class? So things that are putting out current income. And it used to be, it's only a hard asset. And I will soon publish a piece, How Real Are Your Real Assets? I'm about to publish one much sooner on how ESG are you really, because there's so little precision measurement in that world. But anyway, when it comes to yield, one of the things we're seeing in alternative yield are long-term contracts. So here is a group, and they basically make electricity from the sun, also known as solar energy. And they've got a 20-year contract from the utility backed up by a state. And one can basically refinance that into something that's delivering, 2 to 4 times what a bank will pay you. And it is not secure because it is not FDIC insured, but there is that long-term contract with the utility backed up by a state. So we believe things like that are going to be very good at acquiring investors. And there we're hitting not only the income bucket, but we're hitting the ESG bucket. And in some ways, you might still say that solar energy is hitting a little bit of the innovation bucket. So we look in those 3 areas. There are other areas, but when we are vetting deals with issuers, we're making sure we believe that there is a mass niche audience that is interested in this specific topic and whatever it is they're trying to solve for. So
which is the capital structuring side, right? And Oscar, I'll let you jump in, but just a final note on that is, while it is extremely important to structure the investment in a way that works for issuers, I would argue, and it sounds like Andrew is saying something similar, is that you need to understand what the investor demands are in the market as well. And when you are able to consider what is a structure that works for investors today, something that benefits them, during the investor acquisition process, it is painfully apparent to tell when an issuer went through a process to say, I understand what investor demands are, and I am seeking to create a structure that fits very well for them, while also fitting well for us. But when you do that, and you do include things like yield, which is, I agree, a high demand investment structure or an investment component. ESG is, ESG in my opinion is, you're not doing any harm. You're not really also doing any good, right? I would love to be more active with that investing, but when you are able to provide that benefit, again, and a lot of it comes in how you structure the investment so that you can allow for a more natural transition into the investor acquisition process. It's important to think about that up front. And there's a lot of different factors that go into that, but it is a very key point for investor acquisition when you've thought about what is best for your investors or future investors.
Yeah, I mean, when someone shows up with a product or service, you don't want to find a product or service that sounds great but is seeking a market. because very few people are Steve Jobs and can invent something as useless as the iPad that I own 6 of. So, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, how useless. There was no market for it. He invented it and proved us all wrong. I own 6 of them. So, and mostly my daughters do, but I do have access to at least one. Anyway, yeah, so we're always looking for a product or service that we feel that there's not just customers for, but customers who would also be investors. So, because we've had an issuer come to us, they had 220,000 people on their monthly newsletter, and we got nothing from it because of what they do for a living. They're too young. First of all, you have to be over 18 just to invest in a CF or an A+. And they had lots of high school students, as for instance, on their list. So the question is are your customers also investors? And you can also say the converse, will your investors also become customers? But to kind of echo what Elliot said before, even if they're not, odds are they're going to be advocates for the company moving forward because they emotionally and financially have bought into your company. And therefore, and you use the word alignment, which is something that we talk about a lot as well at E5A, is, this alignment is what we're looking for. So, totally agree with you there.
So, okay. And I've heard, I've been taking a lot of notes and I take them because, it's interesting when you hear people in the industry talk about it. And I always take the other seat back and I go, why are we spending so much time trying to educate the market about it? So there's there's a gap here. Something as I let you both, and you guys went on a kind of a process. I feel I know what the entrepreneur is feeling. Because it's so we're trying to describe something in a way that it's very different than what we've done before. Investor acquisition has been dialing for dollars. You're a VC, they made the target sectors. This is different. I kept hearing the word emotional a lot of times, connectivity to the opportunity. So where's that sentiment being collected? Because it's good that we know that that's what that connection is going to be. Where is it coming from that is going to drive us to that? Is that something that it's now starting to appear? I guess that's the question. Because if you're going to spend this kind of money, you go, okay, well, this is great. I mean, the traditional way is buy a list, target VCs based on these sectors, these stages of funding. That's not what this is, right?
So I'm going to jump in and say it starts with affinity. And, that someone has an affinity to or for something about what it is that this issuer does. And that is definitely a data set that we want to acquire. So when we're looking at, they're raising X amount of dollars, the minimum is, let's do the math. If the minimum is $300 and the median is 500, how many times does 500 go into the number that they are raising? That needs to be a tiny fraction of the number of the total universe of people. So we do some back of the napkin math to see, is this even possible? Do we believe that it's plausible? So, but it starts with affinity. It's not just the emotion, but it's the preponderance of doing it. But then take all that away, because we start with that data. And then we have our data I mentioned on people who invest in private deals. We start with that. So we're going to come at the offering page with these different data sets, maybe a third data set. I talked about the professionals within it.
So can I ask you something?
Well, just let me finish this one thought, and I will promise to be quiet. But we will throw that data out as fast as we can. Why? because a subset of each of those groups is going to self-select, meaning they're going to raise their hand and say, click, I want to know more about that. And when they hit that offering page and they let the whole page draw up and they stay there over a minute, they've now joined another group, or they're forming a new group of people who say, I'm interested in investing in this. They may not become investors, but they're an awful lot more interested than these large data sets that we started with. And we refer to that as building first-party data. And there's a lot of emotion in that first-party data, even if it is a bunch of code and a bunch of data. You know, if people watch a video or they download a PDF, they have invested more of their time and also of their emotion. That's better first-party data. And if you're doing an A+, we eventually will change all our data to just people who we can do attribution analysis on, who've clicked the invest button. But as fast as we can, we get rid of our initial data sets, and we're only looking at the attribution on people who have come to the page. So because they have said, we are absolutely more interested. So if you take those three original groups and now you have a mishmash of those who are interested and you do attribution on them, there's always an aha moment for us in investor acquisition of, wow, I didn't realize they all have these things in common. And that then needs to be scalable for it to truly work.
And two things to add to that is, and I love Andrew's data-driven process. It's vital. It is definitely a math game. But along with a game is the emotional intelligence component. And when you think about 2 points of friction during the investor acquisition process, the first is getting somebody to take that action, which Andrew decides is either saying the invest now button or the download this button. So if we think about that point of friction, how do we alleviate that and remove the friction in order for them to take that action? And either that's a message, a video, more and more, how do we communicate the passion and vision component in as either few clicks as possible, few words as possible, as little friction as possible? The tools that are available to us now in 2021 are very different than they were before. And so, you know, we believe the medium of absorption of quick data is changing. Previously, it was a PDF in a deck. Ooh, I would like to see this. Now we're seeing, you know, more engaging techniques, 30-second describer videos to catch the attention, to build that connection in order to have or incite that person, potential investor, to take that action, right? So that first point of friction and trying to remove that and engage in ways where your passion comes through, that's a key part of the process.
So
the other,
sorry, you were going to say the second friction? Sorry.
Yeah, the second point of friction is now that they've hit the invest now button and they've gone to the page, one of the challenges is there's just a lot of requirements that that person must go through in order to invest in the process. And as much as, so this is somebody that is, hey, you got me. I am interested in enough. You've done something for me to at least want to learn more. And when that site comes up and it says, hey, you must fill out XYZ information in order to sign in, it is a roadblock. It is a place where we see, again, friction turning people away. This is where we believe human communication and a hand-holding can be very valuable. And so it's an age-old tool but it is something that I believe is going to make a comeback, because there is a education and training and implementation process that one has to go to, particularly when they're investing for the first time. Why do I need to give you this information? What are you going to do with it? And be able to walk that person through the process and say, hey, this is why you need this. This is how you get here. Let's get you through that hump, answer those questions, and then you can talk about the investment. So so how do we solve for that second point of friction? That's something we're constantly working with, but we do believe that going old school and picking up a phone and having a conversation, not that you're going to do it with thousands or tens of thousands of people, but we do think that that is something that is helpful during this process.
So the digital guy is going to completely agree with you. You know, the sad truth is that only 30% of the people who click the invest button complete the process all the way to putting their money in the first time. So we have developed a lot of techniques, some of them only in the last 6 months, to get people to complete that investment. And we can get that to typically between 60 and 70%. How do you get that to 90? The only way that I can think of is, but the question is incentives. How do you get someone with a Series 7 on the phone who will call these 30% of people, 20% of people, and convert them? But what we have seen is that when someone from an organization like yours will do that and pick up the phone, odds are that they'll close, meaning they'll put their money in, and they'll actually put more money in because of the type of engagement that's just happened. So, you know, we can let them know that you exist. We can lead them to a page. We can get them to click invest. But then there is friction that is beyond my control. And those who know me know I hate things that are beyond my control, but that process is. And one of the great things that can help complete that process is a chat, but more important is someone on the phone. I don't think that's replicatable.
You know, I got a number of questions here that came out of that as you guys were going on. As a company, if I have to, I heard affinity for the very first time. When now, so is the company that is coming through this process going to need to have that mapped out already? Or is that what you guys are in your shop are going to be working on?
Yeah, so sometimes it's really apparent. We have a product that is aimed at the LGBTQ community. So that is X number of million people in the United States. You can then divide that by age, by household income, et cetera. And we were working on data on that. There's plenty of data on it, and it's easily acquired data as well. So this is a great thing until one of my daughters says, Dad, you know, what is wrong with you? What about supporters of that community? Don't they have just as much affinity? So in this case, she said, you know, that TV show we love to watch, RuPaul. RuPaul has 12 million followers on Facebook. How many of them are not part of that community, but support that community? So affinity isn't always extremely obvious, or at least it wasn't to me in that one sense. And, you know, it took a 20-something to remind me I'm not as woke as she is. So to then say, gee, now we have another 12 million people who we can acquire data on. And, you know, again, subtract everyone who's under 18 and everything else like that that we need to do to make sure that we have viable data. So sometimes it's really apparent, but sometimes it's not. You need to think it through. You know, it's if you have a product and it's aimed at parents, should it be aimed at grandparents as well? Should it be aimed at the cool aunt and uncle? Should it be aimed at, you know, it really winds up, do you really know who the full audience is who would invest in this? So, the affinity needs to be there, and it needs to be statistically significant size group, but you really need to think it through a lot better than what may be completely obvious.
Okay. Yeah, that look,
we just think affinity is a great word. We just use a different term, and it's resonate, because maybe I'm not a part of those groups, but does what the message that's coming through resonate with me? And if there is some sort of resonation, I could fall outside of those initial data screens, but because the message resonates with me, I have interest. So
depending upon the product or service, we may hit a lot of family offices with the Reg A Plus message. And a lot of people will say that makes no sense whatsoever. People who write checks for millions of dollars, like a family office, are not putting in money at the same terms as someone who can write a check for $300 or $400. Why would they? But the reason they might is, first of all, it is because it may resonate, what Elliot just said. And if it does resonate, they may do it in their personal account. And if they work at a family office, we know they can well afford to do it. But the second thing is that they may decide, hey, this is something we want to do. We were doing a Reg A Plus offering, and a casino running Native American tribe saw the ad, went to the offering page, figured out how to get in touch with the issuer, and made a separate deal with the issuer. That's not part of the Reg A Plus. But if we weren't doing what we were doing, they would have never heard of this company ever. So, but what we were doing resonated, as Elliot said, and that's what it takes. It's that aha moment. I get it. I need to be a part of it.
And just to come back to that, so Elliot mentioned a couple of frictions, and I just want to make sure if they resonate well with you as well. So he's saying for investor acquisition to be successful, it has two friction points. One, obviously, to take action, that's where you got to make sure your emotional value proposition, coming back to the affinity or the resonate, has to be well. And the second one is the data, the data inputs.
Yeah,
do you agree with those two?
I would add one more. So I would say first, it's getting them to the offering page. It's going to be an ad of some sort. Okay. It's going to be an email of some sort. It's going to be a social media post. Or, as we like to say, it was none of them and it was all of them.
So get to the page. Okay.
Getting them to the page is friction number one. And that can be 6 touch points or 8 touch points or 25. Depends upon the person, the circumstance. The second one is getting them to click that invest button.
So which you said, take action. Okay. All right.
So the first action is getting them to the page. The second is clicking invest. And then, they're going to ask you for your social security number. How many people want to put their social security number into a web form?
Okay. So you both agree on that last step.
To me, that's the greatest prohibitor. I don't want to give my social to anybody.
No, I know. But as you know, in order for again, this is best practices. If the company did the offering page correctly and clearly demonstrates the broker-dealer there and understands that KYC needs to be performed, people are doing it today. Millions of Americans have already gone into Reg A, and we see it. But I'm not getting, the first 2 points, I believe that's all on the investor acquisition team. They need to do their job. First of all,
that is my job. Yeah.
Get them to the page. That's and the fact that you identified point number 3. So we're going live and testing point number 3. So we believe in investor fatigueness. And I think that we believe that because 30 to 40% of the same investors reinvesting, they're getting fatigued. Oh, not again. I want to invest. So there's that, or the new one. So we understood that was something that needed to be solved, and it's good that everybody's recognizing that's and what people need to start realizing, that if the market is 233 million Americans, that fatigue can get very, very big very quickly, and we want it to get bigger. But if we don't solve number 3, we will never scale any further because this is what we're looking at. We're looking at more Reg CF platforms than ever before. So imagine, oh, I like that one. Oh, I got to log in again. Oh, I like that one. Oh, I got to log in again, right? And so that's one part. And then, oh, that's a nice Reg A deal. Oh, wow. Oh, look at that Reg deal. And I got to do it all over again. So the traditional people go, oh, that's easy, Oscar. Just put in the Twitter or the LinkedIn or the Facebook, LinkedIn. No, that's not. That's just to get you in the door with a little bit. What they really need is the rest of the data in order to pre-fill it and to carry it. And it needs to be in a way that can be trusted and validated, because whoever's receiving it or getting it, it needs to be able to go through. So we agree 100% on that. I didn't realize that it would tie into investor acquisition, but
it's a key component, Oscar.
Yeah, no, I agree. This was a really interesting discussion, just watching the two of you. And if I seemed like I was bored, I wasn't. I was taking notes. And here's why, because the problem we have as an industry, we know the stuff. We know it inside out. And then somebody asks, what is investor acquisition? Yesterday, I had a conversation with a group out of Australia. Never heard that term before. So is that like marketing, what I hear these guys go out and get you eyeball? So, but understanding that as an industry, there's an education element, educating the people what resonates means, what are those themes that Elliot brought up, what are the emotional drivers? I mean, we've spoken about that before. That's always been critical. I always provide another component to everyone, and I say, look, investor acquisition is a double whammy, and you said it there with that reserve coming out in this way. If you weren't doing what you were doing, they wouldn't have even heard about the company. People make the assumption that investor acquisition is, we're selling shares, come out and buy. That's not an emotional driver, other than a different type of group of people that you may not. But it is pretty interesting. We're getting more methodical about this. I think the key going forward for the industry, because it's evolving, there are many different touch points that are starting, and we're all working towards getting better information. So as that information is being made available, it can be quantified in a way that it can indicate, okay, here's a $10 million offering, 3,000 investors. The affinity was this. That's a very powerful component that I think we're going to get to. That's my excitement about all this. Elliot said it. We didn't have the tools a few years ago. Now we do.
Well, and just a final thought on that. Appreciate you. You've always got great stuff cooking, Oscar. So I love hearing.
No, but you've always known
when they're
about
coming. But
yeah,
you're right. This movement that we're seeing with Reg CF, Reg A plus, this is a move to more independent self-sovereignty and an ability to generate wealth, right? That is what the industry is presenting for investors. And to the extent that we're able to provide access to quality and accountable investing opportunities that can lead to individual wealth generation, embedded in that whole movement is that kind of individual passport concept that you're mentioning, where I can take my data and my KYC AML and walk around to other groups and be able to, with confidence, be able to show that I am a reliable investor and that I understand how this process works. So, that is something that's missing today. And it's great to hear you again talk about the investor fatigue and now potentially providing a solution for that, because what we're going to be talking about in 3 years or 5 years is very different than what we're talking about in 2021. And this is going to be right along those lines.
We've always believed that this is our thesis as a company. The whole market of private markets is massive, but the scope of information we have is on less than 2% of the market. And all of us rate ourselves to that. And that's all that was available. I get it. That was available then, but now it's changing. So, but this one is larger. There's so many different players. There's Andrew Korn, there's Elliot Chun, there's all that. And what we didn't expect, or we wanted to, but be careful what you wish for, we got it. The advantage what we're having at our company is that we're able to listen to all the different audiences and what's happening. The broker dealers are having challenges, all this, because they want to do it on a cost efficient manner, right? They want to keep the cost down. So rightly so, and I applaud them for that. But now they're discovering that everything they do has a ripple effect of consequence, right? And then there's Andrew that wants it more efficient, so he can tell his clients, I brought in 10,000 hits and 2,000 invested in, all that. But there's the other part where we're hearing is listening to the investor. And the investor is an interesting one. We thought it'd be millennials, very adaptive. They're not. In fact, the millennials are not the majority of investors. The majority of investors is everyday person, accredited, and they're not just investing once, not just twice. They're investing multiple times, and sometimes even in the same company, and yet they have to go through it all over again. I mean, this is so you're right. So everybody's, I don't think everybody's in fatigue, but we're now seeing it. Was it there 3 years ago? Maybe it was, but nobody was paying attention to it just yet because people were just trying to figure out one side of it, how to get in. And then, so slowly and slowly. So the reason we're talking so much about this is because it's become a sector, a very important sector. And there are different techniques. Andrew and I did a whole session on all the different techniques, but all the different techniques go to the same 3 points of friction that you mentioned: getting them to the page, get them to take the action, the invest button, and then please fill out the button. So now that we know that, we didn't know that then, we know that now, we can take action as an industry. So yeah, this is part of the dialogue. Every webinar I do, I get something new. So thank you to all of you guys, as always. So listen, I mean, I love the conversation with the both of you, because you both come from different sides, but very similar at times. And it's refreshing. And I know for most people, it's very granular, but it needs to be. So I want to thank you both once again. Any closing remarks, Andrew, first, and then I'll go to you, Elliot.
Yeah, I think that we've really hit on it. I mean, the title is Why is Investor Acquisition Important? It's because you don't have a raise without it. And then, I'm hoping that people who've been listening develop an appreciation for it's complex. And
yes, thank you.
That it's not easy, and that it takes a lot of effort, not only you can't just wave your hand and hire a firm like mine and a broker dealer and think it's done. There's a lot of input, a lot of involvement from the issuer as well.
Elliot?
And yeah, and the thing I love to think about is not what the last 3 years has been, but let's take a look at what the next 3 years will become. And the conversations that we're having now, Oscar said 2% recently, that number is going to grow as more and more success stories hit the market. It's going to be painfully apparent to almost everybody that this area of growth, Reg CF, Reg A plus, is the new investing. It's not a frontier, because frontier signals early stage and not here and still emerging. It's here today, and we're excited because more and more investors will be investing through these types of structures, and we're going to see some fantastic issuers come to market, not just this year and not just the next year, but in the next 3 to 5 years. And this is just an area of innovation. It's an area to align with your themes and your passions. And we look forward to being there with you every step of the way. We're all very approachable. We welcome conversations, so please reach out. We look forward to talking to you more on these, as well as in 3 to 5 years when we'll be talking a very different narrative.
And thank you for that. And here's, you touched on that 2%. So obviously there's 98% of the market that we haven't seen. But I'm going to close this off with everybody. The 2020 numbers just for Reg CF, it is saddening me at this moment that we don't have it for Reg A, but I'm going to give it just one because to Elliot's point, we didn't have this visibility before. Now we do. What do we know? 1,100 companies raised just almost $429 million. Out of those 1,100 companies, 229 actually raised $1 million, 229. The average investment by company increased from $278 to $308,000. 48 different states participated in investing. 358,000 new investors came in to invest in these Reg CF, and there were 51 registered CF platforms. To me, I'm excited just by, and people go, but those numbers are small. When we started, it was small. It was zero.
You can throw them all out the window with Reg CF going from 1 million to 5 million.
Oh, exactly.
It's a whole new ball game. I wouldn't touch a Reg CF a year ago today.
Exactly.
You couldn't get my firm. You couldn't pay us to work on one. Literally. Now we're very excited by it.
Exactly. We need to add Reg CF. We need to add Reg A. And we need to bring the other ones as well so people can see the whole scope of the private markets. What I'm trying to get at is that until we do, people won't realize that there's just as many good opportunities here as it is in those venture back. I have nothing against venture back, but venture back is only 2% of the market.
We're working on some things that are going to rival publicly traded. So
yeah, it's going to be fun. We're going to have a lot of fun. We all had this was a very informative session for me. I'm glad, I would have picked your heads on it, what you thought it was, but the two of you came back with it and it validated what we heard it from them. We kept it quiet. We heard it from you now, and you're now indicating that it's part of the friction. And Elliot, you thought it was number 1 and 2. You just added another step to it. So looking forward to our next conversation piece. For those that want more information, you can get a hold of Andrew or Elliot. Just simply go to KoreSummit.io and you'll find all their contact details, LinkedIn profile, and email address. And of course, the video will be available at YouTube or KoreSummit.io. Till next time, Elliot, Andrew, thank you guys. I enjoyed this one. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
See ya.
Take care.
Bye.